Who was Ulysses S. Grant? He was the commander of the Union Army that relentlessly pursued the enemy during the Civil War. Grant demonstrated persistence and strategic genius that brought about victory for the North. After the war, a grateful nation twice elected him as their president. In 1869, at age 46, Grant was the youngest president in U.S. history at that point. Grant himself was highly trustworthy, yet his administration was full of scandal. First, I'm going to tell you about Ulysses S. Grant's time as military commander. On April 12, 1861, Confederate troops attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. This act of rebellion sparked Grant's patriotism, and he volunteered in military services. In February 1862, in a joint operation with the U.S. Navy, Grant's ground forces applied pressure on Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, taking both. These battles are credited as the earliest significant Union victories of the Civil War. After these battles, Grant earned the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant and was promoted to Major General. Union war strategy called for taking control of the Mississippi River. In December of 1862, Grant moved his forces into Vicksburg, which was a key city of the Confederacy. It took several assaults, but Vicksburg finally surrendered on July 4, 1863. Though Vicksburg marked Grant's greatest achievement so far, rumors of his heavy drinking began to surface. However, his closest associates said that he was sober and polite and that he displayed deep concentration, even during battle. According to an article printed in the New York Times on October 30th, 1863, when someone charged General Grant with drinking too much liquor in front of President Abraham Lincoln, Mr. Lincoln, recalling General Grant's successes, said that if he could find out what brand of whiskey Grant drank, he would send a barrel of it to all of his other commanders. Grant then set out to track down and destroy General Robert E. Lee and his Confederate troops. From March 1864 until April of 1865, Grant hunted Lee in the forests of Virginia, all the while inflicting casualties on Lee's army. On April 9, 1865, Lee was forced to surrender his army, marking the end of the Civil War. Now that I've told you about Ulysses S. Grant's success as a military commander, I will tell you of his accomplishments in the White House. Ulysses S. Grant had little interest in the idea of running for president, but popular demand for his candidacy was too strong. Grant believed that the federal government had to help reconstruct the South. He also believed that African Americans needed government protection from racist Southern governments and to prevent former Confederates from retaking power. In his first inaugural address, Grant spoke of wanting the ratification of the 15th Amendment. He pushed hard to get the amendment passed, making many Southern whites angry in the process. In 1870, the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote, was ratified. On February 19, 1868, the bill was introduced in Congress to create the Department of Justice. President Ulysses S. Grant signed the bill into law on June 22, 1870. The department's immediate function was to preserve civil rights. It set about fighting against domestic terrorist groups who had been using violence to oppose the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, including prosecuting Ku Klux Klan members. At times, the president placed federal troops throughout the South to keep law and order. The result was a dramatic decrease in violence in the South. Finally, I will tell you why Grant's presidency is often seen as a failure. Historically, Ulysses S. Grant and his presidency is known for the scandals in his administration. President Grant was too loyal to those who he had worked with in the past. This led to some dishonest and corrupt politicians on his staff. The president himself was never personally impacted, nor did he personally benefit from any of the scandals. Still, the charges of the corruption damaged his presidency in the eyes of the American people. In the ratings game of U.S. presidents, Ulysses S. Grant usually ends up in the bottom tier. C-SPAN's presidential poll in 2000 placed Grant at 33rd. An American Political Science Association survey in 2018 promoted him to 21st. The usual trend of presidential reputations over time is downward. Grant is one of the few whose ratings have ever risen. In conclusion, Ulysses S. Grant was a war hero, but a reluctant politician. Ulysses left the White House in 1877, admitting in a remarkable farewell address to Congress that it had been his misfortune to be called to the office of chief executive without any political training, and apologizing for his errors of judgment. President Grant was a natural leader on the battlefield, but was not an especially effective leader of his country.